Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. It's Wednesday, April 2022, and the meeting is being conducted in a hybrid manner consistent with current state regulations and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure that there will be public participation unless the law requires it. This meeting will not have public comment except in connection with the first item of business, citizen request to address the Finance Committee. First, I'll confirm that a quorum of the members of the Finance Committee are present. When I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. John?
Present.
Jim?
Here.
Louise?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Rick?
Here.
Nick?
Oh.
Carol?
Here.
Barry?
Here.
I believe Ms. Bird.
Here.
Thank you. As a reminder, anything you share or state will be a matter of public. First item is citizen request to address the Finance Committee. Does anyone in the room or online wish to address the Finance Committee? No one in the room and no one online. Okay. The next item is approval of the minutes of our April 6th, 2022 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes of April 6th as circulated.
Second.
I think I said some minor comments to these, but those are just,
Okay.
okay, just minor.
I'll
comments.
set that.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll come to a vote. John,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Louise,
I was not here.
Tom,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barry.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. The next set of articles are CPC articles. So we'll start with Article 15, appropriate to community preservation funds. We have the chair of the CPC here, and we also have some of the members, or excuse me, the applicants of the CPC. As I recall, there wasn't, I mean, there was certainly a lot of discussion about Article 15, but I don't recall if there's any additional information that people were seeking. Is there a motion? Anyone else?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? John,
Aye.
Jim,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Yes.
Rick, Carol,
Yes.
Yeah.
Barry,
Yes.
Yeah.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you. The
Mr.
next
Chair,
article,
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, may I request when you call a vote that you segregate the lovely and talented Mr. Riley from myself so I can distinguish.
yes, that's a very good idea. Thank you, Rick. Next article is Article 16, the supplement. Again, I think we weren't seeking any additional information. Unless there's further discussion for a motion.
So I move approval of Article 16 to adjust the amounts.
Second.
For the discussion. Barry,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes. Yeah.
Carol, Nick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise.
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The next article is 17, Needham Housing Authority pre-development of Linden Chambers. We have Reg Foster here. Yeah, if you'd like to. Does the committee have any questions for Reg?
So I want to thank Peter, Reg, other members of the CPC for responding to our questions with such great information. It really was very, very helpful to me, and for better or worse, I'll be the representative who'll be addressing the article. So I really kind of want to know what I was talking about. So I'm very grateful for that. I think I have a good sense of pretty much most of this, and I apologize, my colleagues may have other questions, but I'd like to just focus on the two kind of unanswered questions. Everything else I'm in pretty good shape on. But the two unanswered ones that I'd like to know about is, I understand it's a potential 3-phase project, potentially over 10 years. I know when we're going to begin, when we're going to commence, actually complete construction and so forth. I saw that schedule. I saw the conceptual designs, 2013, 2019. And I understand that may change based on what we do here. But after all is said and done, do we have a sense of what the total amount of money it will take to be able to get you to complete phase 1 through 3 of Linden Chambers? And second, of course, from where will that money come? Because ultimately, town meeting is going to want to know, if we're going to spend approximately $1.4 million to do this, what is it that we're going to get? What is it that we're going to be reaching towards? And if we don't have any certainty with respect to what we're going to do and where we're going to get the money to do it, tell me why I should get up and convince town meeting to spend the money for the project.
Sure, absolutely. May I introduce the other two people here?
Yes, absolutely.
Here's Margaret Moran. She heads up our Cambridge Housing Authority team. She was instrumental in getting the High Rock Homes project done 15 years ago, I think.
Getting there.
Or I shouldn't even embarrass you or anything like that. And we have, contracted with them to be our redevelopment consultant. And she probably has better answers than I do to that question, but I'll start. Here, this gentleman here is Steve Merritt. He's our new interim executive director of the Cambridge Housing Authority as of Needham Housing Authority. Good. Needham Housing Authority as of Needham, Cambridge, we're all part of the same family now.
I'm beginning to think that.
And Steve brings enormous experience. He was 17 years head of the Norwood Housing Authority. He's been president of Mass NARO, New England NARO, and National NARO. And he's going to help us hold the fort for the next few months while we find our new executive director. He has also done a lot of redevelopment down in Norwood here. So he may know more than I do as well. The answer to your question
And
is,
before you do that, I'll also say Steve was incredibly helpful on the Memorial Park building and the work that he did to help that committee and that board to get that building to completion was very welcome and very, I'm very grateful for what he did. So thank you.
and implicitly, I forgot to say, he lives in Needham. And he grew up in Needham, went to Needham High School, and
We're not going to hold that against him.
we're not going to hold that against him, but he also got his start as a commissioner of the Needham Housing Authority for 10 years in 1983 to 1993. So it's sort of a full
Dan
circle of life.
Matthews, I think he compelled him to do it.
Well, Dan's mom was on the board at the time.
See?
All right, so where are we
your
on these two questions?
So the question is, yes, we have a back of the envelope pro forma of how much the project's going to cost, and it's going to be $115 million
115.
altogether, 115 altogether. We have details right here that Margaret can provide. And there isn't a snowball's chance in hell of finding that kind of money and doing it as one big bang. And we probably wouldn't want to do that anyway. That would just be too disruptive on the neighborhood, on the tenants and everything else. Our vision is to be able to do a phase 1 project that has clears out about 24 of the units that are on the certain north side of the property, the low rise ones. And phase 1 would build 40, 50, 60 replacement units, depending on how much density is, something we all have to agree with the planning board and so forth and so on. And that project is costing out right now in the back of the envelope pro forma. This one, it's about $30 million. And we're within shouting distance of raising, knowing where that funding would come from. And may I turn it over to Margaret, because she's the ones who developed these numbers.
Sure. I mean, phase 1 is, I started, when I started the engagement in Needham, I started specifically looking at what would be possible. And I've been sort of saying to Reg, it's within stretch, but it became even more so with Representative Garlick's work over the last 6 months or so, where she
12 months.
12 months.
14 months.
Yeah, but, right. But
2
just
years, yeah.
probably the whole career.
Let's not quibble.
But she ended up getting 2 earmarks specific to the Housing Authority and specific to Linden Chambers that account for 3.75 million.
I'm sorry,
2.75 between the opera and an economic development bill. So that really is a foundational type of funding for the project, and really kind of will set the stage in terms of what we would be seeking from DHCD for their contribution to renovate that portion of the
The
site.
HCB is,
DHCD is the state agency that oversees public housing. or state public housing in particular. And so they provide funding right now to the Needham Housing Authority in the way of operating expenses, but they would also provide some capital funding.
So if we just look at phase one,
Mhm.
and by the way, I'm okay, at least I'm talking personally now, I'm okay with looking at this as to 3 phases. And, you know, sometimes you can't build the whole mountain, and you have to start one at a time. And if phase one is the first phase, you know, if the 1.4 gets to me, you know, to some incredible units for phase one, I'm content with that, personally. Again, that's just my opinion. But I just want to make sure I understand. So it's 24 units that you'd be replacing with 40 to 60, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and then you said 30 million.
Right, so the balance of the funding comes from a variety of other sources. One is the low-income housing tax credit program, which is a federal program that provides tax credits to developers like the Housing Authority developing new affordable units. And you agree to rent them to low-income folks, so it falls right into the mission of the Housing Authority. So that's really where the bulk of the money comes from, is the low-income
How
housing
much?
tax credits. That's about $12 million.
Okay.
And then on top,
What was the DHCD?
the DHCD comes in 2 parts. The public housing portion of it would be a total of $4 million. And the new units would be supported by another branch of DHCD, which would be close to $2.5 million.
And what, under what would that be?
They have an alphabet soup of funding available, so housing stabilization fund, community-based housing, community housing.
Other funds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole menu of funds, but they support any kind of new affordable housing production in the
And
state.
Representative Garlick's 2.75, that was out of an earmark.
That was, 2 earmarks one was opera and one was an economic development bill, but specific to housing.
Is there a deadline by which those monies need to be?
The opera
Spent.
funds have until 2024, they have to be obligated by 2024, spent by 2026.
So you've got 2.75 there, you've got 4 million in public housing from DHCD, 2.5 from the other funds with DHCD, and you've got 12 million from the low income tax credit program. I can't do the math, but. I don't
We're still
think-
short, so the Needham Housing Authority would come in with the program loan, and then we would be back for so the $1.3 million is pre-development funds, which basically gets us through zoning. So we have a plan for the entire site. And once we get that traction and we have a path to other money, then we will be coming back to you to fill in whatever the gap is from those other
Does the
sources.
30 million include the 1.4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you would need probably in total, including the 1.4, somewhere around $3.5 to $4 million. But again, we see that as gap financing that we would look to come with all of our other financing kind of figured out with a certain specific, this is what we need to finish the
Jim,
financing.
would you
piece.
like a copy of this?
Might help,
Jim, I have a copy of the.
but I'm making nice notes.
No, but there's,
And I've been rounding too, so don't hold me to.
would
the
anybody
pen.
else like a copy?
I think everyone on the committee would like.
Yeah.
Like, if you, you have copies for everyone. just take-
Just in case.
I'm just doing round numbers, 3 and 5, 17, 21, 22.5. So I've got 22.5 I've been able to count from my notes.
Yeah, and then I don't know if we talked about a mortgage.
We did not.
So that's another $6 million. So that the way the rent structure would work, it would be able to support a little bit of a mortgage. And so then the housing authority would have a monthly bill to pay each month, but would have adequate funding based on the rents that we would be projecting for the units to cover that cost. And of course, it would be sized to not be, we don't do risky financing, we do safe and secure financing.
Right.
With a lot of belts and suspenders to make sure that you don't run into any kind of risk.
Just kind of,
So then the NHA, if I'm doing my math right, it looks like it's only like another $1 or $2 million.
It's a couple $1 million, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that the housing authority would come into a program loan.
And that's just for phase one.
That's just for phase one. Phase the full redevelopment of the site, as Reg said, is somewhere closer to $115 million
In today's dollars.
in today's dollars.
Now, in order for you to be able to move potentially ahead with this $30 million project, as I understand it, the 1.4 million, I'm using 1.4, I know it's 1.3
Yeah,
something,
rounded up. Yeah.
but the 1.4 is essential to be able to access some of these additional funds, whether they're federal or state.
That's correct. And the key is that, you know, and the hardest money to find in doing affordable housing development is what's called pre-development funding, the money that you need to actually show that you have a real project. And what makes a project real is not only, you know, great concept design and pretty pictures, so to speak, but actually having the zoning in place to actually move a shovel. Nobody's gonna give you money. I can tell you with certainty that DHCD will not even let you apply for money if you don't have the zoning in place to support what you're proposing. And so the idea with this particular request and these funds is to actually take us through the phase and get that zoning in place, not only for phase one, but for the entirety of the planned redevelopment. With the idea that once we have it in place, we have a plan, we can start marketing and selling that plan and then be eligible to actually put applications into DHCD to actually augment the work again that Representative Gaelic has already done to secure a certain portion of the money, but then to secure the balance of the money and really then begin doing the construction documents and the pieces that would take us to a closing the construction.
What would you say to someone on the other side of the coin that says, okay, there's a lot of ifs in here? You know, if we get this funding, if we get that funding, if we get this funding, is there a better way that we can use CPA money of $1.4 million to make some improvements or benefits to our housing situation in Needham without having all of these ifs? What would you say to that?
No, the opportunity at this particular site to be able to take your $1.4 million and turn it into potentially renovated existing units, so replacing what is really in not great condition and very undersized for today's, I mean, they're 400 square feet,
Yeah, no accessibility.
no accessibility. You replace those
storage.
units and then add potentially 28 brand new units for $1.4 million start. I would take that. I mean, I think the return is incredible, and I don't think opportunities are that prevalent in many communities other than looking at land that you already have. And the Housing Authority is really blessed with some really incredible opportunity, not only on Linden and Chambers, but certainly, again, you know, the hope at some point in the future would be to do a High Rock phase 2. And then there's some possibility, as the master plan study proved out, to even potentially add some units down at Seabeds and Cook. So, you know, there's just a lot of potential on land that's already dedicated to affordable housing. That's very well located. You can't get a better parcel, I think, than Linden and Chambers to place senior housing. And I think the opportunity, you know, to do it and to see that return, both in terms of addressing existing units that are in poor condition, but then adding to those units, I think it's just a phenomenal opportunity in return. And then you just have to have faith. I mean, you know that.
Oh, boy.
And faith in the sense that, you know, we get to zoning. I mean, you know, if you can get your zoning, which I feel confident there's a right project here that will make all sides happy, then you have shown the funders that you're ready to move. And then that's the magnet that attracts.
Right. Oh, they want to show you have skin in the game and
Yeah.
that you're ready to go. So I've got all that. My own suggestion, and then I have one last question, and I apologize for monopolizing this, Mr. Chairman, and I'll keep quiet. Is I would not talk about phases 2 and 3. I would not talk about Seabed. I would not talk about High Rock Estates. They may all be fantastic projects,
The only one is Fred.
but we've got to get one in front of us done.
Yeah.
So keep, as they say, the eye on the prize. And this is a great project. I fully support it personally, but let's not confuse the issue, and let's not let them think about other monies and other things down the road,
Yeah.
which we'll have to deal with. And then my last question is something that came up before. I was very impressed with the information provided by Reg and Peter. But tell us, since you're here now live and in person, why is it we should be trusting you with $1.4 million?
Well, I mean, I work at the Cambridge Housing Authority, worked there for a long time. We are one of the few housing authorities in the country, really, to do our own self-development work, where we have taken exactly these types of funds and use them to better our affordable housing in Cambridge, to the tune of, since 2010, over $600 million worth of construction, using the same tools that are on this sheet as a resource to do that, and improving well over 2,000 units of housing. So we have the track record, and we've proven that we've been able to put these deals together from no idea, no blank piece of paper to buildings in the ground, people in the homes. And then, we started to get phone calls from other housing authorities saying, well, how are you able to do this? Can you come and do this? And so we started consulting to other housing authorities back in 2019. And we have a number of housing authorities that we work for. The Needham Housing Authority put out an RFP, which we responded to, and part of the interest and the part of the housing authority resulted from the success and the work that I did from High Rock Homes. At the time I did High Rock Homes, I was a part-time employee at the Housing Authority, and running my own little consulting company. And I thought this would be, I really enjoyed working with the Needham Housing Authority, working with the Needham town, and an opportunity to come back and further, the goals of the Needham Housing Authority as it looks to move forward. So track record, I have an incredible team behind me. I have the face at the moment, but I have a staff of 25. They're very smart. They know how to maneuver through financing. I've got designers, I've got project managers, I've got construction administrators. We do it all, and we do it very successfully. And we are nationally recognized, and I think nationally appreciated for the work that we do. And I would welcome anybody to come and visit kind of the transformation that we've been doing over the last 10 years, specifically to our elderly housing, because it really is exceptional. And we're really proud as an agency, and I'm certainly proud as a director of the department that oversees it. And so, we don't, we get the job done, I guess is the best way I can say it. And we get a lot of doors closed on us, but we just figure out another way around that door, or another set of keys to open it, to try to move forward this work. And we've been successful, and I have no reason to think that we wouldn't be.
Well, I appreciate you coming. I appreciate Reg and Peter having you come in. I'm done, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman, and no need to apologize for asking the questions. One other question, do you have a rough timeline? I know there are a lot of contingencies with the funds, but for phase one.
So we're awaiting DHC's approval to issue out the RFP to hire the architect, which we, put that in early with the hopes that as funding discussions progress with the CPA funding, that they'd coincide that we would be out and get started right away. So we would begin the preliminary design with the hopes that, fingers crossed, we'd have something in front of the town for zoning next year.
First quarter of 2026 is what they have in their proposal
And
for
then once,
completion of phase one.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, and then, construction would start, after the zoning's in place and the funding's done. So the construction completed by 2026.
Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Several questions, if I may. First of all, where do I find the breakdown on what the 1.4 million is going to be spent on?
In the,
That was in the
frequently
doc-
asked
that was in the
questions.
chart that was sent out to you.
Okay.
It's 10 different items, A&E, all the way down
And
to
is
title
there-
report.
Is there a schedule of when those are expected, those deliverables are expected to happen, or if not, could you
There's
tell us
there
when?
is an RFS draft, final draft before DHCD that can spell that all out for you if you would like me to send it to you here.
That would be great. So that was my first question. The second question is on this summary, which was you provided, which was great. And looking at the sources of funds, the Needham CPA to 3.9 million. Is this 1.4 part of that?
That's
Or is the 1.4? So after this 1.4, for what you'd be looking for would be 2.5 million. So it's not, this 1.4 is inclusive. within
That's
that.
correct.
Okay. And then my last question, can you tell me a little bit about the developer fee of almost $2 million? How that's calculated, who that goes to?
Sure.
And where I can get information on that.
So the developer fee is the fee that the entity that's overseeing or taking the risk on the affordable housing construction and development earns. So in the case of this project, the developer would be Needham Housing Authority, and it would be their fee. The fee is regulated by that state agency, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and they have a very specific methodology calculation that they use to calculate out what would be an eligible amount for a developer fee. And I can look, we can send you that, but it's really based on cost.
So I take it the 2 million, I'll just use that, the round numbers, Jim used 1.4, is calculated off of the construction cost?
Yes, off of construction and other costs.
And is it something that someone bills against it and says, okay, I'm billing X amount an hour for so many hours and therefore it's gonna be X or Y? And then I guess I don't consider the Needham Housing Authority to be a for-profit organization, so why would they be getting a
Well,
fee
they
of that-
actually, if you look at it, they're.
Why would they be getting a fee of that nature?
Well, they would be getting the fee for that nature because it becomes, potentially it would be then the resource that they would have for pre-development expenses for the next project. But in the case of phase one, they're actually contributing back more than their fee back to the project to build it. And one of the things you want to do, you might say, I'll just say oftentimes, as a nonprofit, as a housing authority, you don't need to expend as much staff time as the developer fee you're eligible for, and as you said, you don't have profit, but you want to have the maximum developer fee because you're also getting the tax credit benefit from that. And by having a higher developer fee, you basically get about $1 of credit for every, you get 50 cents of credit for every dollar that you have cost for. So that $2 million developer fee actually generates $1 million of tax credit equity to the project. And then oftentimes, and certainly this is my experience in Cambridge, we contribute our developer fee back into the project and only take out the amount that we need to actually cover our staffing costs related to the development.
So I guess that's to be continued. We're gonna
Yeah.
hear more about that.
But yeah,
My ears are alert to that, so I look
Yeah.
forward to future engagement.
There's one other answer I just want to point out, which is the monies we're asking for now to get going with Linden Chambers and the other projects from the town, from CPA funding, is only a portion of what we need to spend in pre-development. And we earned a pre-development fee of $600,000 when we did the High Rock Homes redevelopment in 2005 and 2008, and that's been sitting in our piggy bank ever since then, being saved against the day that has come now of being able to do a Linden Chambers, to be able to do more redevelopment of High Rock Homes and so forth. So it becomes a funding that you can apply to the projects that you do in the future.
It's an acknowledgement that there's risk associated with being a developer.
Exactly.
Right? There's post-development, you're assuming risk when you're a developer. And so you're being compensated for it. It doesn't matter if you're a for-profit or not entity.
Well,
You're assuming risk.
and you own it, and you have the contractor who does the work, and you get bonding from them to make sure that they're gonna complete the work that you're paying them to do, and also pay the people that you're paying them to pay. So I'm not quite sure what the risk, when you have.
Well, the tax
what
credits.
the risk,
The tax credits have a risk associated when you go and sell the tax credits to an investor. The investor puts certain milestones and requirements on, and if you end up having a contractor who is a little bit slower out of the gate, then you may have, a delay in deliverance of credits that you would need to cover, or, you have some, you always have contingency on your construction, but you end up uncovering something that as you exhaust your contingency, your developer fee is yet another contingency that protects and ensures that the project gets to completion.
Thank you for the explanation.
Dick?
Could you explain how the tax credit works into the financing package? Several steps behind.
Yeah, and it's, it wouldn't be the way I would necessarily fund affordable housing development, but really it's the only tool that the federal government has that's available to provide any kind of meaningful funding to the project. But basically, Congress has created back in 1986 the low-income housing tax credit program that allocates out to the state a certain amount of tax credits that it can give to affordable housing projects. The state allocates those to projects. It's a competitive process. You go and you apply for that. And then when you get that allocation, you then can sell those credits to a for-profit entity that would then, when it comes time, just like it was the other day, to file your taxes and you have a tax liability, those credits would go and lower your tax liability. So we'll sell $1 of credit, and if the market is good, you get $1 back from the equity investor. But oftentimes, they'll say, well, I have to get the credit over a longer period of time. I'm not going to give you that same $1. I'll give you 90 cents. But it's money that you get that comes into the deal that doesn't need to be paid back. That is created as an incentive by the federal government to bring private equity dollars to the creation of and preservation.
Now,
of
those
affordable
dollars
housing.
linked to any of the specific sources of financing, or could that come from someone totally unrelated to the project?
It's people totally unrelated to the project. So oftentimes the investor can be a bank. Some of the local banks like Rockland Trust or Easton will buy tax credits. Citizens Bank, Wells Fargo, they all buy tax credits. Sometimes it's insurance companies. Very, very rarely is it an individual, particularly if it's a larger project. But it seems to be a sweet spot for banks. So oftentimes it's the banks that are buying the tax credits to lessen their tax liability every year.
One follow-up related. Did I understand that all these amounts are committed for, or are they targets?
Targets.
Yeah, everybody write draft at the top of this. I forgot to do it when I made copies for everybody because it will change.
It does, yeah, and it constantly gets updated with better information as costs come together, and sometimes you overachieve and do better on one line item and have a deficit in another.
Well, the RFS and the company we hire is going to change these numbers in a major way.
Yeah.
To understand what needs to be built and how hard it is to do it.
Yeah.
We
And
have a
then,
major moving target on construction costs
Yeah.
going on right now too. So that's a
Yeah, and then
Scary
interest
thing.
rates change, it's lots of different moving parts, and so it's something that gets constantly
we
updated.
have a depression by this time next year, as some people are saying, then that will change everything.
Do something, Louise?
I did. It's actually a comment to both the Housing Authority and to the CPC. So given the timeline and your available sources of funding, I want to make sure that the language of the article is broad enough so that you're able to use whatever source of funding you need to at the time and are not left with the $1.4 million. Like you might need to use an earmark before the $1.4 million. And so where this is all part of a single plan and part of your funding, I just want to make sure that you don't lose this $1.4 million because the earmark had to be spent before or sooner.
So the earmark, there's enough time, there's 2 or 3 years.
It's really short.
Yes, but we're only going to get so far through zoning,
Yeah,
and then we have to go from there, and that's where the
Okay.
earmark money
okay,
will roll in. And it's only the 1.25 million that has the limitation on it, the ARPA funds.
The 2.7,
The
the
1.75
1.75
does
the-
not,
Economic growth does not have,
okay,
and that's not as certain of funding, that's just a bond out, reservation of funds. And we have to go fight for that money, with FA.
Yeah.
so the only other thing I would say is that and I'm gonna round it way up to 1.5, is still only 5% of the overall project, which is still not a huge contribution on the part of the town for affordable housing. That's my only comment.
Are there any other comments? Go ahead, Barry.
I apologize if I somehow missed this. What is the financial arrangement with the Cambridge Housing Authority? And is that in any of the stuff that's been disseminated?
What are you getting paid?
We have, well, I was waiting to see if
No,
Fred
I'm
wanted
sorry.
to answer.
I didn't quite, I thought it was,
somebody.
I thought it was asking a different question. So you're asking, so we actually got 3 very good quality proposals from the Cambridge Housing Authority, and the other 2 were from private sector companies. And any one of the 3 could have done the job, but Cambridge Housing Authority was far and away the most advantageous for qualitative reasons. And they were, 2/3 of the cost in terms of the billing rates that the other companies would charge us. Sorry to say that.
So just to
now.
follow up on Barry's comment, so where?
I have not told that to Margaret before today.
Well, she can't get away now, she's here. So just where is that money shown? Where is that?
Oh,
So if you look at on the sheet, on page 2 of the frequently asked questions, that development consultant, that would be us. Cambridge Housing Authority.
so again, last summer, we entered into a 5-year agreement with them on a task order basis. And today, she's here today as part of the CPA funding that we received award of a 3 years ago here. And then we would just issue another task order when we get to that part of the project.
Barry, does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else have questions or comments? Is there a motion on this article?
I move to recommend adoption of Article 17.
Second.
Further discussion? We'll come to a vote. Barry,
Yes, sorry, yes.
Rick Lunetta,
Yes.
Carol. Carol,
Yes.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and John,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next article is 18, Needham Housing Authority Property Survey. Does anyone have any questions from the board? Now, is there a motion?
I move that we recommend adoption of Article 18. That's the right number.
That is the number.
That's the number.
For the discussion. Rick Lunetta,
Yes.
Carol. Carol,
Oh, sorry, yes. Couldn't hear you.
I'll speak up. Barry,
Yes.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The next article is 19, Community Farm Beds. We have the applicant Joe Leghorn here, well, representing New Community Farm.
Firstly, not the.
Yes, I understand.
Farmer Joe.
You bet.
Welcome.
That's what I've done since retiring from being a lawyer.
I think you're doing better.
Having more fun.
So thank you for your responses, my questions.
You will.
Are there any additional questions or comments from members of the board? I'll just reiterate, I mean, I really like what you do, and I think, your business model seems to make sense. But I'm not sure that tax dollars are appropriate for beds that aren't really accessible to everyone because there's a necessary fee and entrance fee.
But, I'll respond to that.
Sure.
Back in 2016, town basically announced that one of its achievements
for the past 10 years was establishing the community farm. The way it's working is really very much like Sioux New England.
I'm not sure what that means.
What it is we'll give you space, we'll give you the Stone Zoo, we'll give you Franklin Park. In the case of Zoo New England, about $7-8 million a year to help the operating costs. And you, a profit, you run it. You got people with expertise, you bring it, you do it. And you can charge people to go to that zoo. And what that does is cover your expenses. The fees here basically just cover the expenses. The plan is to provide compost for the growers each year. The issue is if somebody rents a bed and abandons it, and you've got a mess to clean up, that costs you money. The license agreement with the town is like an operating agreement. We're required to do this, required because there's no sewers out there to provide for porta potties. With more people there, more use. Of how much it would cost. Other towns, Wellesley, Natick, all charge for community beds. It's not unheard of. It's not like we're making money. We're just covering expenses and we're taking the risk too, because if the expenses are greater than what we estimate, the farm absorbs it, or the not-for-profit absorbs. So what the town basically does is really provide a community farm with community beds for people to use. And what we're doing is just covering the expense of doing that. And that was the plan. So it's not like no one can access. And I fear it's interesting too, because other community farms, like the Natick Community Farm, if you want to get to the top of the waiting list, in fact, you need to become a member. We've not had membership to access the community supported agriculture or participate in any activities. It's all free. This one there are defined expenses solely to doing this. We just did it, and you've got to figure out what it's going to cost because you're a not-for-profit, and you just can't look at running $100,000 deficit over 10 years. And part of it too is, we're invested into maintaining the beds, protecting that investment that the town is making, taking care of them, repairing them. All of that costs money.
I mean, there are other ways of, you could keep the same business model, I suppose. I don't want to tell you how to run things, but I'm saying it's just, it seems strange to me to public tax money for something that's not accessible to the public or all of the public.
Well, it is, my view is anyone who wants to do it throws their name in. We're giving away at least 10% of the beds to people who can't afford it. We're also making 10% of the beds accessible to those that are challenged physically, either in bending or walking. We're going to be putting a walkway that wheelchairs can be pushed up on. So, all of that is part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, go ahead.
The article talks in terms of funding the construction. Yet as I listened to your explanation, it sounded like these funds were also potentially being used to absorb operating costs.
No. All of the operating costs will be absorbed by the farm.
So your discussion about cleaning up the messes and so forth has got nothing to do with these dollars?
Nothing.
Okay.
That's what the fees take care of.
It's part of that. Do you have who's gonna do the work for the 200,000? You have a quote? Is there a bid, or is this just it off the wall?
No.
Best guess estimate.
Now, if you've looked at the materials, all the bids were there, and as I said to the CPC, one of the problems since the beginning of the pandemic, when trying to get bids in this area, is very, a lot of people don't even want, unless you've got money in hand, most don't even want to talk to you. Luckily, we did reach out to some contractors who were very active in the organic growing area, and they gave us bids that are more than fair. And that's where we got it. So it's not pie in the sky.
Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion then?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Finance Committee recommend adoption of Article 19, appropriate for community farm growing beds.
Further discussion? Rick, Lunetta,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
No,
Jim,
No.
John,
No.
and the chair votes no. So that's 5-4, I believe. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Take care, Joseph.
You too, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
How many years have we known each other? We're going
Too many.
40. We used to work together.
The next article is Article 20, high school tennis court design. Are there any questions from the committee?
I vote to recommend adoption of Article 20.
Move to recommend, yeah.
Move, vote, second vote.
Okay, further discussion? Go ahead.
Quick, there was a lot of discussion about the maintenance issues.
Yep.
Associated with this. Has been any further information on that, or?
I watched the presentation by the CPC, not by you personally, but there was a presentation by the CPC, and I heard that they had relayed a commitment from the Park and Rec Department to maintain the courts.
which we'll then have to make sure is in the budget next year.
I assume that there will be budgetary impact.
The short answer is there's a renewed commitment in Park and Rec to take care of items around town that may have fallen in disrepair. That's the commitment that they've made.
And if I may, I don't want to interrupt me, but I just can add to that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think this addresses Louise's concern, which is that we're talking about some operational related issues that we wanted to address on the CPC side. And one of them was this kind of condition of funding, that there's going to be a commitment for maintenance.
Thank you.
We'll come to the vote. Carol?
Can I just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I just want to, I'm going to vote against this only because I want to see something done comprehensively. I don't want just to put 50,000 out there to a designer who's going to design something without knowing what the full program is going to be and what the full commitment is going to be and what the full cost is going to be. And so I don't want to do it piecemeal. I want to have that commitment be more than just someone saying, I make a commitment. I want to see the program. And so unless and until such a program is put forward, at least to my satisfaction, I'm not going to be voting in favor of this.
Can I ask you, John, a follow-up question? This differ, John, from design on other projects.
So because other projects aren't ones that have not been maintained necessarily, or some of them don't even exist yet. But this is one that has existed and has been neglected. And I'd like to get to the cost of that neglect and understanding what the commitment is and what it's gonna, how it's gonna be funded going forward, so we're not put in this position again. And until we get that, at least for me, I want to see that before I start piecemealing money towards it. I don't mean me, but
Yeah, no,
not that I have the power to piecemeal anything, but just what I would like to see.
I don't disagree with what John's saying, but in all honesty, having been around the block a couple of times, the projects that we vote to recommend and that we actually put money towards never guarantee that we're going to get the result that we all want and expect. And you remember how many times we rebuilt fields now over the years, starting in the mid-90s, and then 10 years later, we have to rebuild the fields again because there was no proper maintenance program. I think you make a very good point. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get the assurances that you're looking for. But I think your point is, well, maybe the point is as important as anything.
Go ahead, Rick.
I would support John's comment. At the risk of not trying to boil the ocean, we don't do a very good job when it comes to maintaining stuff that have fallen into disarray that needs to be repaired. And if we don't do it really comprehensively, I think we have a problem. And the two projects that come to mind really are Emery Grover and Ridge Hill. We've kind of done that piecemeal and to some neglect over time. I think John's point's well made. If we're going to design because it needs to be repaired, then we need to see the full boat and see exactly what it looks like and then move forward with the entire project. So I'm not going to support this for that very reason.
Thanks, Rick. Barry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just I guess, is there an estimate of what would be built and where that money would be come from, or is it to be determined? This is what this is going to determine.
I think we did ask for an estimate last time. It was quite
So
broad.
there's the estimate, did you want me to respond?
Yeah.
So the estimate is for resurfacing would be in the range of $500,000. For a full rebuild would be $1.5 million. With respect to CPC's commitment to it, we've expressed reservations to the select board about funding a request of $1.5 million, given any number of things, including any number of things. And the response that we got was that it could be one of those projects where the town commits some funds from its from the general fund. And I'll just further note that on our CPC plan, our capital plan, we had the number we had pegged on it was $500,000, supposed to 1.5. In terms of our plan.
So the CPC's soft commitment is for the $500,000, if you want to call it that.
I have a lot of strong-willed individuals on my committee, so I have to preface that by saying, yeah, that's yes, but I don't speak for the committee. But yes, there's evidence out there.
I appreciate that. Obviously, we don't know.
There's evidence out there that shows it's $500,000.
Peter, do you think there's any, this 50,000 is to evaluate current conditions and provide design options? Could part of the 50,000 give us an idea of what the long-term maintenance of those options would be and what the cost would, because then we would get, for $50,000, we'd get an answer of what the cost would be and what the maintenance would be and what therefore the operational cost going forward would be. So we would have a sense of it before we moved on to the 500 or $1.5 million.
That's out of my lane. I don't have the answer.
They must know what it takes to maintain a tennis court.
Yeah, I mean, the only, it's a soft
We've had
answer.
tennis courts here, I think, for 60, 70 years. So I
Yeah.
think they know what it costs.
So we've got to rebuild every one of them.
Right, so I think as Louise sort of touched on it earlier, is that I think we would see the answer to John's question, but not until we see the budget after these are built. And so it's a chicken and egg thing, but I would believe for $50,000, it's a reasonable investment to find out how to fix those tennis courts, which are the high school tennis courts.
There must be current tennis courts that we're maintaining. That would be a good estimate.
Well, we didn't we do Mills?
We just haven't seen it.
Recently.
Didn't we do Mills like
Currently.
5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, right? John Boehmer demanded it. But so, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Rick, I understand what you're saying. I don't really see this as a Ridge Hill or a Emery Grover analogy at all. Emery Grover's, I don't even know, 120, however many years old. That's a building that I think deliberately, in my opinion, not speaking for anybody else, was they didn't put money into because ultimately they thought there was something going to be done about it. Ridge Hill, I can tell you without a doubt, because I was part of those conversations, was a building that we definitely did not put money into because we knew it was a building that we didn't want to invest in unless everybody was all in, and they never have been all in. So I understand your point about those 2 buildings, and it does show how we probably need to do a better job on it. I'm not sure it's analogous to some tennis courts.
It may limp a little bit, but the point I was really trying to make was that we kind of go at this piecemeal. And sometimes for the right reasons, but maybe in wrong directions. That's the point I was making. I probably should maybe not have used those 2 examples, but I thought they were germane to what I was bringing up. But more importantly, however, I think if this $50,000 is going to be for design and engineering, and we have all kinds of questions about ongoing costs and ongoing maintenance and some commitments to CPC, but in an unvoted way, could we not take this, move this to the fall when maybe most of those answers would be before the group, and the group can move forward with some determination that the $50,000 would be spent wisely and in the right direction. And that's the point I'm making. I don't disagree that the tennis courts need to be fixed. I've used them in the past and they're wonderful. But I just think we need a more comprehensive approach to this before we spend the $50,000.
Sorry. Go ahead, Dick.
This question may have been asked and answered before, but if so, I've forgotten the answer. Are these courts practically usable now or realistically not usable in their current condition?
They can't be used for competitive matches. There was plenty of opportunity to roll an ankle. I don't know if they're used for recreational purposes, to the extent that they're being used for recreational purposes. My understanding, they're not.
I don't know.
I think that they may be.
They're borderline at best.
They
Is that
may
it?
be being used for recreational purposes. I learned that only from one member of the select board, but I do know that they're not adequate for competitive purposes.
From my position, it's critical that, the town's got to have adequate facilities for a major sport in high school.
Again, I don't want to interrupt, but if there's the notion that putting this off to October, that's an off-cycle request for CPC. There's issues related to that, and it's up to the discretion of the committee, maybe the chair, to have a special vote out of cycle. If you're going to do that off the cuff, probably should look for the $50,000 for a source other than CPC. I can't really see convening my committee for that amount of money.
Yeah, I don't speak in opposition to put it off. I speak in opposition for the way it's being presented and the piecemeal fashion. I think something like this should be, and I look back to one of the things that it's my own pet peeve about some of these things in the Community Preservation Act is that we do something and then we never hear about it again. And I look at like the South Street boat launch is just my example of that. We actually put money towards the design of that, right? And 4, 5, 6 years later, there still isn't. I don't think I don't think it lends itself well to these little things like this. I think something like this, which is really within the realm of our Park and Rec or the realm of our DPW, should be done in that way and in that manner and handled that way, instead of sort of just parceled out into a little portion here without even knowing further on what the commitment is or isn't going to be. I just don't think it's the right mechanism to, I understand the courts have problems. I'm not saying they don't. I just don't think this is the correct mechanism to address them.
It is because they have money.
Yes. I was gonna
So I
say
still, once again, I say it's not the right way to address it.
I got it.
We could take it out of free cash.
I mean, that's not out of the question. We'll probably.
And
discuss
again,
it.
the part, it's not the 50,000, it's how it's went about and whether it's 50,000 for a design is really appropriate for something like this. That whether it should be looked at in-house and say, okay, we think we should just resurface these. Doing a procurement to bring in an engineer or designer for $50,000 to tell us something I think we could figure out in-house. I just don't think it's the right way to go about it.
Okay.
Well, if the sentiment of the committee, it sounds like that may not be, willing to move forward at this time. I don't have to pursue my motion.
Well, I guess there's a motion in a second on the table.
I think we ought to vote one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we take a
Okay.
vote and then we'll figure it out if it doesn't pass.
Whatever you'd like, Mr. Chair.
So we'll take a vote. The motion is to recommend approval for Article 20, high school tennis court design. Carol, how do you vote?
I vote no.
Rick,
No,
Barry,
Guess I'm a substance over form person. I will vote yes. I'd like to see this move forward.
thank you, Barry. Dick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
no.
Jim.
Jesus Christ.
Is not an answer.
Okay, I'm going to vote no on my own motion. Isn't that nice?
John,
No.
and I guess the chair will vote yes.
Looks like
So where does that?
5-4 against.
Is that 5-4 against?
5-4 against.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm happy to continue the discussion if there's another recommendation that the finance committee would like to make.
So,
Okay, so now why am I saying this is no?
no, I think that
I guess I'll talk to Jen.
what
Happy to
the
talk to you about it.
message back should be is that we really want to hear more about the tennis courts, how they're being maintained.
Yeah.
What do we know today? Like, why would we even need this $50,000? And what would be the plan for whatever the range is, 500 to $1.5 million for funding?
Well, I think we need the tennis courts. I think,
I think we do too.
right, I
Yeah.
just think that.
We agree.
What
We
John,
agree. Yeah.
what John said, which I did not think about earlier, was that, perhaps we need just a more
Mhm.
comprehensive presentation. So
Mhm.
I would agree with that.
Dave, do you?
Mr. Chair, I just reminded the motion with recommend adoption, that failed. So right now, the finance committee does not have a recommendation.
Yes.
Someone will have to move not adopt.
Thank you. for
I
that.
move that we recommend not to adopt Article 20.
you're gonna keep trying till you get a motion.
I want to make sure that I'm on both sides of the question.
You're succeeding. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay. We'll vote. Carol,
Yes,
so you vote yes to the motion to recommend against adoption.
correct.
Rick,
yes,
Barry,
No,
This is all a test. See what they have. No.
So
Louise,
Yes.
Jim.
you gotta have
Really
an,
could
you have
make
to
it
have an
interesting.
eye.
I could make it very
You
interesting.
have to have an eye.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
And the chair will vote no. What is that, Louise?
We voted 5-4 to not adopt. After we voted 4 to 5 to adopt.
This one
To
passed, right?
not adopt.
Okay, so this
5 to
passes. So
4.
the recommendation is to not
Recommend
adopt, not adopt Article 20. Okay, great. The next article is Article 21, Emery Grover Construction Design. And part of that, we had maybe wanted to discuss in free cash, but we have a further discussion later on as well. Are there any questions or comments on this?
Yeah, it's already.
Correct. Well.
I think just a comment, if I may, and that is, this is one of those interesting ones and where you stand as a FinCom member and where you stand as a town meeting member. And, as a finance committee, we voted or recommended not going forward with the project as it was articulated in the fall. And obviously it was the decision of town meeting otherwise. I respect that decision. I'm not going to stand in the way of the project as a finance committee member, understanding what the decision of town meeting was on that. However, I still stand as a town meeting member, not thinking that this is the appropriate way to be spending the money and not looking at the alternatives that I and others were hoping for. So I'm going to vote in favor of this as a member of the finance committee, but just so I can go to sleep at night, I needed to make sure that as a town meeting member, I'm consistent with my position.
I agree with your logic. As a finance committee member, I'm going to vote in favor of this or recommend that it be adopted. I'm actually undecided as a town meeting member. I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to vote in favor because I do not believe this is the appropriate way to use free cash, either from the town or from the CPA monies. I really believe, as I said at our last meeting, that this is an opportunity for the schools to not only take advantage of our debt management policies, but also taking advantage of our free cash position. This should be a vote whether we want to incur debt to build the building. And town meeting said, yes, we want to do it. So fine, I respect that vote as John does. And then we should go out and borrow the money, and it should be part of our debt policies and part of our debt picture into the future. And if that impacts some other projects, well, that's what people are voting for, and that's what the school committee is recommending. But I find that to assuage their position with respect to future debt by using free cash isn't really fair to the rest of the town that actually could probably use that free cash in another way. They can't monopolize every pocket of money that the town has. That's my objection to this.
I understand that objection. And perhaps my feeling is that I really think Mitchell and Pollard need to get done. And I would really hate for Emery Grover to jeopardize either of those projects. And that's why I don't object to using some free cash here.
Yeah. So they made their bed, as they say, Josh, and I'm not going to actually make it more comfortable for them.
This does do that.
That's just
You're right.
my vote.
But it's interesting when to pick up on Jim's point, it's a little bit more than just a little free cash. It's about 40% of this project is to come from free cash. That's more than just a little bit. And I don't recall a project that we're building, for the length of this project will be in existence for, that so much of it is funded in that manner. It's just about 40% of it. And it was interesting listening to the Housing Authority folks today, and I asked the question about the 3.9 million and realizing that actually that's all they're getting is for that phase one is 3.9 million. And to think that for the Housing Authority, they're getting 3.9 million, but for the Emery Grover building, they're getting 6 million from the CPA, 4 of which is the free cash. To me, I wrestle with the balancing there. And so I've been, I was the one who originally raised the amount of their free cash. I understand that, they're most likely they're going to be coming back in the fall for $1 million to $2 million more. And I expect that will absolutely have to be borrowed at that point in time. So the borrowing ratio will go up a little bit. I also, the mechanics of sort of how to tackle this, knowing that the wish is to go forward with the project and how we actually sort of mechanically change the article or amend the article. Do we want to do that? And if so, where do we put the free cash to? I'm not sure we have the time or the inclination to do that right now, but so I have concerns about the use of the free cash, but I'm not necessarily sure, knowing that we're going to be borrowing $2 million more later on, and it's going to have to be borrowed, not free cash, that in a sense, we're almost diminishing the free cash a little bit or potentially.
The total project, remember, is $115 million for Linden Chambers.
Yeah.
115 million. So even though Mr. Zambone made the comment that there was plenty of money in the CPA to take care of the town's reserves, I'm not so sure about that. And this amount of money from CPA, $2 million, I know it's not 115, but it could help. And so that's my problem, John. I think there's a lot of other needs and wants. Now, this year, what do you do with it? because we're not at the 115, million dollar mark. I'm not really sure. It seems like the way that the chronology and events have come together have kind of put this in motion, and I'm not sure that it's the right thing to do.
Can I make a comment unrelated? I don't understand the emergency preamble.
So my understanding is because part of this money is to cover the work they're gonna do at Hillside to get it ready to accept the Emery Grover people who work there. And so they can commence that work in June, I think is my
So
understanding.
we already have a bid.
No, this is to get a bit faster. This is to accelerate the process so that they can move out the Emery River into Hillside as quickly as possible.
There's a bid on the street.
Oh. Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic and in agreement with Jim's position on the debt issue, and I just have trouble voting for article here where we voted against a tennis court for $50,000 on almost a conceptual issue. Whereas I think here is a clearly identified problem with the proposal. I have trouble reconciling those two votes if we vote in favor of this and against tennis courts.
I will be voting consistently.
Is there, last week, 2 weeks ago, I suggested the possibility of using some of the funds from the capital facility funds rather than some of the free cash. Would that make any difference to anyone?
This is a major, major project.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, and I hate to look at you, John, but you seem to have the most experience with PVPC and, your construction stuff. Have we ever used this amount of free cash for a major construction project for one of our buildings?
Well, we used it free cash for the garage, not the garage, the Cogswell building.
Right.
I think- And the field house, yeah.
Well, Fieldhouse, it was a pittance. I fought to try and get a lot of money for that, and my friend Peter said no. So, that wasn't a lot of money.
I think the scale of this one is $7.5 million of free cash is what would be
And
going
it's also
towards it.
we're hobbling together funding sources. Like, normally we would never fund a 20, how many ever $1 million project other than through debt normally. That's just how we do it. We're
But
just
I don't
trying to-
necessarily agree that that's
And
how.
why-
And
But I don't understand why we're trying to minimize the debt amount anyway.
because we're at our limit, we're close to our limit, and we're gonna be
No, we're not.
that for the foreseeable future.
Will be, but we
It
don't.
will be because of
The
the
other
future
buildings.
projects that
Right,
they didn't want
but
to
we're
take into
not
account
right
when they did this
now.
project.
But we're not right now.
We're kind of stuck between a rock and hard place because we want to be planning for the future for Mitchell and Pollard. But right now, we're in isolation, just looking at Emery Grover. And it's, we're being forced to just focus on Emery Grover without looking at the future. And I'm not comfortable with that, but that's what we're not being asked to do.
I mean, any of the projects that would have come to us is a priority for whatever reason. Emery Grover happens to be that, or at least the town or everybody's made that the priority because of, how far behind or how dilapidated that building has been for so long. If for example, if the DPW was in a similar position, was unlivable or uninhabitable the way this building was, and we were going through I think we're picking on them because it's the schools are the majority of the buildings to some degree. Personally, I don't, I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, but I just don't see, given our needs for all of our future projects, taking on less debt today to put us in a better position to be able to fund those projects in the future, because we haven't, and there aren't higher priority, or we haven't been presented with higher priority options for the free cash or more important needs. And if there are those needs, I would like to see them, but we haven't been presented with them that would compete for that free cash. I guess.
That's the conspiracy theory. That's the
Yeah.
conspiracy theory right there, Barry.
Okay. Do you think that Dave is holding back on what he wants to spend money on so this can get done?
I would never suggest anything untoward with respect to Uncle Davy.
I would not either. I would not either.
But I can say this, I do believe, and anyone who thinks we don't is sorely missing. There's a lot of capital projects that we have, moving forward, not just next year, the year after, the year after.
I agree.
I think, I'm sorry to reiterate, but we're allowing the schools to get the benefit of free cash and debt, and we're only doing it because it's there. And my position is that if they want to go out and get Emory Grover, which they did, that's fine. Town meeting approved it, and then they should borrow the money. And then if there's a consequence to the way that they've now done their building projects into the future, they should bear that responsibility. Instead of the town bailing them out on the free cash, which arguably could go to other projects. Now, have we been given a presentation of those? No, Barry, we haven't, but no one's asked for it, and no one has been forthcoming to give us a presentation, except the housing authority.
Mr. Chair, I feel very strongly adopting John's point of I think it's wrong for the finance committee, the town having voted to be seen as standing in the way of this. So I suggest a compromise. I suggest that we propose an amendment to Article 21 to change the financing, give the town a chance to vote that up or down. If the town doesn't agree with our proposal for the financing, then we could go to the underlying merits, but at least we will advance what we think is a more responsible way for addressing this project. So I would recommend that we propose an amendment, and I would need a lot of help drafting how much of it should be borrowed, but changing the proportions dramatically so that it's more consistent with primarily debt financing.
Yeah.
Can we discuss that?
Chair? Yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
My only humble thought is that we've been there and done that already and bought the t-shirt. And the town last year voted to move forward with this. And my fear is if we, although seems logical, talk about the fact of free cash, I suspect that's going to be perceived as being obstructionist again. And it's going to cause some kind of issue. I wish that there were issues to deal with that were competing with that free cash that we could logically and publicly speak to. But to an imaginary unforeseen use of that money, although it pains me to have to vote yes to this, I can't think of any other way to move forward with this. It's going to impact us in many ways down the road, no doubt. But the town set upon that step last year. That's my only comment to that.
I'm very sympathetic to Rick's point. I think the way it should be presented is that the finance committee recognizes the importance of financing this on the merits. However, we think there is a better way of doing it, putting it up to the meeting, that if that gets done, then this would come up and presumably we could vote. We could take a contingent vote here that if the amendment is not approved, we could then decide whether we vote on the underlying.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if we go about that, and I may not disagree with that in terms of its merit, but I'm not so sure if we should wait until town meeting floor for an amendment. I'm wondering if our efforts can be better served for the town if we go to the proponents and we talk about this now and talk about the benefits and maybe come to that consensus together before it's seen as a contradictory method on the town meeting floor where it's anybody's guess where it's going to go. And the last thing I want to do is relive last year because it wasn't good for the town and it certainly wasn't good for this committee. So if we're going to pursue that, then I think we should go knock on the proponent's door and talk about it.
So I have nothing against amendments. I mean, I think it's our job to make recommendations that we think are in the best interest of town. I don't I feel like this particular suggestion is confusing to me because in October, our position was that our debt should be reserved for schools. Essentially, I mean, it's not just schools, our debt should be reserved for other projects that seem to be of higher priority. And that is in some sense what using free cash partially accomplishes. But I understand that then the free cash is not available for other things. It just seems a bit inconsistent from what we said in October. Go ahead, Carol.
No, Josh, I agree with you. And I think that on town meeting floor, I don't think we're not going to have a full list of alternatives for this free cash that we've evaluated. So in my mind, that analysis will probably not be compelling. So I am concerned that not going forward on this could jeopardize Mitchell and Pollard down the road. So I don't like this as a town meeting member. I'm not inclined to vote with it, but I think as a finance committee member, I really do think personally, I think we need to support this. So.
Oh, so I wasn't gonna say anything, but now I have to. We are basically paying over about $1,000 per square foot for office space for school administration. And so for that reason alone, I can't support this. It's a ridiculous project. It was in the fall, and I understand town meeting voted in favor of it. It doesn't change the fact that I can't recommend spending that kind of money. It's absurd.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Louise, I share with that perspective 100%, as we all kind of carried that thought last year.
Yeah.
But town meeting decided to move this project forward. And as much as I'd love to say today, that was really a very stupid decision. And we can't move forward with that. On what ground does that move and benefit the town in maintaining that today?
In that case, then anytime we vote design funds, then what is the point of our having a recommendation other than approval of construction down the road?
Well, I think if circumstances change from between the time that we appropriate design and the time we're considering construction, then that's a legitimate reason to change.
Perhaps like using $6.5 million of free cash.
With
I
a
mean,
reduced
7.5.
footprint so that we're now at $1,000 per square foot. The price tag just kept going up since the fall.
I think the footprint's about the same, actually.
I thought it was shrunk.
No, it's even more demonstrative. It's about $375,000 in office, if you look at it. And what Sarah Brady and company spends that kind of money for an office. The whole thought really is kind of crazy, but they decided. And
Okay. I'm
Go ahead.
good with everything.
Just based on Carol's comment, it strikes me that if the finance committee thinks that this is not a prudent, appropriate method of financing, then I think it's our duty to bring that up. And if we don't bring it up, who's going to bring it up?
Mhm.
So I think if the point, unless we make the point, there's a risk of it not getting made at all on the floor.
Then, if that's true, I think isn't Rick's solution the most reasonable, to go back to the proponent, say we think you need
Yeah,
to
if we could,
do it.
yeah, I don't think we need
Because I-
zeros and make it on the floor. If we could
That would
address
be
this between now and then,
Yeah.
that's better.
I think
I
that
think-
position is most reasonable, it's most logical, it's most representative of our thinking. And we take that up to the proponents and say, hey, $6 million really doesn't make much sense here because it does this and this and this, and kind of see where that conversation goes.
So I want to be clear on what the suggestion is. Are we talking only about the $4.5 million in general fund free cash or also the CPA free cash?
I'm talking both. And I also noticed, of course, there's 1,000 from the overlay,
A
so.
million.
A million.
A million, excuse me, I get my zeros mixed up after.
Oh,
8
those
o'clock.
digits.
Yeah.
So that's 7 point, as I think John said,
7.5.
7.5.
Yeah.
7.5. So I would agree with Rick Lonetta. I think, let's go back to the proponents, and I would talk about whether there's an opportunity to discuss an alternative funding
Right.
arrangement.
We have to be careful, I think, if I could just monopolize this for a second, that when we go back, they don't perceive us as trying to fight that battle again last year. Somehow we have to understand that we're all down that path, and now from this perspective, let's figure out a way to spend for it wisely. Yeah.
Kate's got a comment.
Yeah,
I think the proponent is actually the select board. I'm not sure what he's thinking, but that portion is the select board. If you want, I can arrange it at a meeting.
yeah.
I mean, time's running short.
I know it
I
is.
would expect you'd have some kind of actual proposal, you think?
Well, I think the proposal would be 100% debt. That's my understanding from the comments. I'm not sure that I agree with that personally, but I'm happy to discuss
Yes,
it.
the question the select board would have, whether if they were to compromise or you know, offer or make an amendment, would the finance committee support the article? And if you're not in a meeting that night, how do you make presentations? And get my-
No, I agree.
You can get a consensus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I started the whole conversation by saying that even though I'm against the project as a town meeting member, as a finance committee member, I'm gonna support it and would support it with the allocation change in the way that it is right now.
Okay, so I'll suggest that I would ask, I guess, for a motion to recommend adoption of the article as written. If that fails, then we can pursue the discussions with the select board and get a sense of the committee on.
Do we want to, wait, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we want to take a vote on that now before you? I don't think that's a good idea. I would rather that we have a conversation with, you have a conversation with the proponents first. And then we have,
Because I think there's a possibility that while we prefer an amendment, we would still support this. It's quite possible. I would vote yes on this, but I would vote a better yes on something.
Yeah.
better. That sense.
I think.
So I don't want to say no on this and leave to take this off the table.
I think what the town manager asked is very reasonable, though. Are we spinning our wheels just?
We're not spinning our wheels.
Would we have?
Could I,
would
could
we-
I suggest you
Well,
have
hold
a
on.
sense of the meeting
Yeah.
rather
yeah.
than a binding vote, that if
Yeah.
we aren't going, how would we vote? Assuming that we aren't successful in getting an amendment?
Sure. So why don't we go around and see if people prefer. So I guess there are three real options here. Not supporting the article at all, regardless of how it's funded. Supporting the article as written with funding from free cash and other sources, or supporting the article 100% through debt. Am I missing any other options?
No, I guess the question then is about the 100% through debt and what to do about the CPA and whether we leave that alone and just have the 4.5 and the 1 million.
Oh, yeah, we don't control this. I mean, we control
We
our
don't control
recommendations on the
CPA.
CPA money, but we don't control the funds.
So this is a CPA. form. This
Well,
is
if
a
it-
CPA, Right, so how does that work? First of all, I can't.
It's both, the portion that town meeting has the right to amend is the general fund portion. And the CPA portion can only be amended with an approval of the CPC.
So the CPC can approve an amendment, so they, basically, they could put them in the amendment, or if they could just.
Yes,
vote.
the CPC makes the recommendation, and it's an up or down vote
Right,
relative to the CPA.
so that is, we'd have to vote in favor, the committee would have to vote in favor of the amendment.
Just, you're only voting the CPA funding.
CPA funding piece of it.
Or we could recommend to leave that alone. and just leave
You
it
could
to,
recommend that too, yeah.
It's a little simpler.
See, that's what I would do. I think that even though I understand their allocation and what they've done, I wouldn't sort of bring them into the problem I'm creating, I guess. But so I would just limit it to talking to the select board about the 4.5 million and the 1 million.
Agreed.
Okay,
And I think the sequence is important here. You all identified options, but I think the sequencing of the options is important.
in that sense.
You put the amendment last. Well,
The amendment should
depending on
always
how
go
the
first.
amendment
Yeah.
goes, it could determine how you would vote.
I'm not thinking of an amendment right now. I'm just thinking of it in terms of
Yeah.
desired outcomes, essentially. So what is the sense of the committee of those three outcomes?
I agree with John and Dick, and I would suggest that there is support for that only in that, you know, this is historic preservation, which is traditionally a role of the CPC, so it is not out of the ordinary to have the CPC play a role in this project. So I would agree with John and Dick that let's see what the select board and the town manager have to say about a potential change in the financing with respect to the 4.5 and the 1 million.
So more debt, you're saying? I'm summarizing.
Some portion of
Some
it,
portion, yeah.
some discussion about whether there's a better way to skin the cat.
You agree, John?
Yes, I do.
Louise?
Don't support the article. Either way,
Okay.
I don't, it won't matter to me.
Tom?
Yeah, I like that.
Discussion about more debt? Do you like more
Yeah,
debt?
I'm in favor of that approach.
Rick, and I think you suggested it, Rick, so. we can do that. Carol, your, you think it's well? Barry?
Yeah, that's okay. I'm not as worked up about it as everybody else, but that's fine.
Team player.
I'm happy to have that conversation. I guess I would also be happy to support it as written. So Kate, I'm happy to come before you on Tuesday.
I'll come with you, Josh.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's I'm the one who created this whole thing, so I'm not going to abandon you.
Okay.
I think we like
No, he should never say. Okay, so it sounds like we're not taking certainly a position on this tonight, or making a recommendation on this tonight. I did not plan on having a meeting next week. But we will probably need to have a meeting before time. We can
Mr.
write
Chair,
before.
question.
Yeah,
Presumably at the League of Women Voters meeting Monday, which will be before you will have met, is there?
I don't know if we'll have
Caution.
everyone here.
Huh?
I don't think everyone's available at that time.
No,
I
no,
want
what
to know
I'm
how to-
saying
how to
is,
respond to this.
how do we
Oh,
represent the position of the finance committee?
That we're still looking at the financing for this particular
Yeah.
article, although there was a consensus that the committee is in favor of the project itself.
Project on the merits,
Moving
but
forward,
has
right.
questions about the financing structure.
Mhm.
Yes,
that's
yes.
And that's that's what we can communicate.
Yep.
okay. It makes it difficult for posting a video online.
That's all right.
That'll be one real presentation.
Right, okay. Thank you for the discussion. The next article is special town meeting, Article 1, collective bargaining on the hiring. Yes, Louise is recusing herself for this article. Yeah, well,
I think it's a good thing that little girl left before that discussion. She would have been very
Yeah.
confused.
You know why they were here?
I didn't. Oh, I didn't know. Thank you.
That would be easy.
Everybody have one? Except for Louise.
Yeah.
And of course, the people at home.
There's an
They have
They were sent.
I got them.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first item is the collective bargaining agreement with the Needham Fire Union. What I handed you was our summary of the cost items that I had talked to several of you about, or at least looking at the cost items. And essentially, the agreement with the fire union would bring the fire union current to fiscal year 2022. They didn't have a contract for 21 or 2022. The wage increases are 3% in 21 and 2% in 22, consistent with settlements that we've reached all the other units that have settled for those 2 years. And there's some minor language changes in the addition of the Juneteenth holiday as an example. But one of the major initiatives that we have with the fire union is that over the years, the firefighters are on a schedule of an average of 42 hours worked a week, and all of their benefit structure is based on that. And over the last several years, we've created new positions that are 40-hour weeks. Some of them are 5 days, 8 hours, and some of them are 4 10s. And so we had to go through the contract and virtually every single article work out the language that would make the benefits essentially consistent with the number of hours worked per year, because they're expressed in the fire union. It's an unusual situation where they're expressed in days and nights, because that's how fire schedules used to work. So we will continue and start up again with our fire union early next year, continue our conversations with them on our priorities. But we do think this is a reasonable contract for bring the fire unit along for FY 21 and 22.
Are there any questions from the board?
Make a motion to adopt whatever article it is.
I'll second it.
And Dick, did
The stipend change is what?
It's to provide for a certification program for the fire inspectors, and there are 2 fire inspectors in the department, and that they go through additional training and certification, which is the kind of thing that's needed for these major project plan reviews that we have. So it's a modest stipend for them.
And just the availability of these funds for 21, which is passed, and 22 that we're in is what?
The classification, performance
So
incentive.
there's still
fund.
money set
Yeah.
aside in those to
Address
address.
townwide expenses, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Kate, do you have a balance on hand? Do you have a balance handy of performance and classification?
I'll get that to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
There's a motion and a second for the discussion. We'll come to a vote. Carol,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jim,
Yep.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Louise, welcome back.
On back.
Next article is Article 2, Collective Bargaining, Police Union.
Mr. Chair, this is a lot more comprehensive contract. It's a 4-year contract, 1 year for FY 22, and 3 succeeding years, 23, 24, and 25. The key takeaway for this contract with the Needham Police Union is that it meets strong objectives set by the select board and that we've heard from the community. The first is that the union has agreed to support the town's removal from the civil service system to have a more locally based system for both initial recruitment and for promotion to ranks within the department. This is something which is one, but a very first step of helping us to widen the pool of applicants and diversify the department. The other key priorities are to provide internal equity for the education pay that we pay, what we used to call Quinn pay. And that you probably remember from years ago, the Commonwealth used to help pay for that, and they don't anymore. So in 2009, we reverted to a scheme in which new hires were not eligible for the entire amount. And this has really created problems for us, not only for people working, doing the same job for different pay, but also we're seeing people leave the department and go back to, or go to departments where they're paying the full pay. So that's been a priority of ours for many years. And then third, we are proposing pay increases to get us really not in the middle of the pack, but at the top of the pack, because it is very hard to recruit police officers right now, and we want to recruit the absolute best candidates who are out there. I'm sure you'll agree that this is a departure from our mantra of sustainability target between 4% and 4.5%, about 6.5%. I can tell you that we do believe that the requirements that the police department have under the Police Reform Act required certification and the post commission. These are new obligations and new legal standards that apply to them. We think this contract is fair, and we do think we are very much assuring you that we'll be back down in the area of our sustainability target for FY 26 and beyond. I'd be happy to answer any questions. There are a lot of items in here.
So when you say back down to sustainability, that means between 3 and 4% above fiscal year 2025, for instance.
So we try to keep our entire budget moving forward between 4 and 4.5%, right? So and it is our custom, as does the schools, is to show you on this chart the obligations that are already there. So employees are already allowed to get longevity changes, they have annual step increases, and so we try to have any increases in pay along with those already bargained items not exceed more than 4.5%. So yes, but it wouldn't be 3, it's over 4.
Okay. The reason why I ask, I'm not opposed to this. I think you're going to get a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yep. Kate, not a question, but thank you very much for the numbers you gave us. Since Article 2 and 3 are separate, can you break down the cost per article? Or is there a reason why you combine the superiors and the rank and file?
It was, if I may,
Please.
it was just easier, the two different unions, we needed to get settlements with them both. So it'd be cleaner for the civil service, because they're both impacted by the civil service changes. And language is a little different with the two, but I looked at what's the total cost that we could afford. So they're not exactly the same. So all the numbers are piled together.
There's also only 3 of them, and we felt it was a kind of a more comprehensive representation to put everybody together.
I'm sure at town meeting, we'll talk about them together and vote for them separately. However, in order for, I know I'll get the questions, and if I could have something in hand that would allow me to speak to the message, because I'm sure it's going to be a hard battle, a hard sell, and people have lots of questions. And if I can present it in such a way that would eliminate some of the numbers questions, it may make some of the conversation easier. So may I ask you to break this down for me? So it represents individual numbers for Article 2 and Article 3.
We can talk about that tomorrow, Rick. Okay. Let's see what we can do.
Go ahead.
A couple of questions. Historically, there's been parity more or less between the police and the fire. What is this going to have a boomerang effect and the fire be beating at the doors over this?
Well, I'm not sure I'd agree there's been parity. I think
That that was my assumption, which may not be
I
correct.
think generally speaking, base wages, we try to keep around the same. And other changes tend to be reflective of the individual work in the departments. So for instance, the requirements of the certification and the post commission would be something that no other employee in Needham is required to have. Then you have other things like in the fire union where the shift, the number of hours and the shift, which was bargained, was something that was very unique to them and not in another department. So, but I think to answer your question, are other unions looking at this contracting and be talking to us? Of course.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm not sympathetic to the need to do this, but, and my other question is, presumably by this going up, this is also going to have an impact then on the overtime pay, because it's, as the base goes up, the overtime will go up proportionally.
Yeah, Dave factors that in. Yeah.
Where is that in here?
It's gonna be in each year's budget, right? It's
Correct.
gonna be in each year's operating budget that's presented.
But I mean, the 9%, to take 2023. Reality is, well, I guess this is only a 9% increase. The total increase could be,
Correct.
will be more than that because of the overtime.
Well, this is all that we'll be transferring in.
Yeah.
Yes, the other thing on overtime is that's individualized, so it's not as though overtime itself will go up 9.39%, because some of these pays are to a specific group of the membership. So that's why it's different than the overtime budget is what the police department puts together based upon what their assumptions of which officers would be working overtime.
Did you make changes to longevity?
No, that's just the carry forward from year to year.
But you haven't,
Yeah.
you-
There's no
Okay.
change. on it.
Go ahead.
The ones that are, Kate, in 2023, the education pay and Juneteenth holiday, and are those one-offs to those years, or those are then going to be in place for every other year?
They carry forward.
They carry forward.
And the asterisk, is that because it hasn't been ratified by the?
The police union has ratified, the police superiors have ratified, the select board hasn't voted.
So we can't vote.
The police union contract is ratified and voted by the select board. It's the superiors that are. And the superiors are three, there's only three of them, so this is the vast majority of this is.
Well, I still don't think so are they separate articles?
They're separate articles.
Oh, so we can do one
Yeah.
one that's been fully voted, but not the other. So, Mr. Chairman, when you said this negotiation satisfies, and I wrote it down, the goals of the select board, and you've heard from the community. What is it that you heard from the community?
We've heard a lot from individual groups, and what we heard at town meeting is that people believe that there are systems in place, or that they would like to see greater diversity in the ability of the departments, the fire and the police departments, to be able to hire. So that is one of the ways that we are proposing to do that, is to get out of the civil service system, which does restrict our applicant pool to people who lived in the town of Needham 1 year before they took it.
Which is what this town and many other towns in the Commonwealth have based their hiring practices on for multiple years.
And we are proposing a replacement system that would give preference to Needham relationships, such that we do value having Needham people. They may have moved out and they may be living in Somerville. They can't take the test. I mean, that's the kind of applicant that we could attract in the future.
I'm just concerned that this is another example of some people saying things within the community that may not represent either the truth or that there's a problem that needs to be remedied. And I know different people can have different views on it, but I'm not persuaded.
It's certainly our chief and the command staff at the department believe that the kind of applicants that we're getting from the civil service system are not beneficial to the town, and they don't expect that to change, and they are very much interested in expanding the ability of the town to have its own locally driven recruitment process.
No, it seems to me this is responsive to the complaints that have been heard about the police, whether you agree with them or not. I don't think anyone would argue that the policing is going to be better off, the better quality we can hire. So this, I think, is very consistent with trying to improve the police force, get the most responsible police force you can. You may decide in totality, some may suggest a total amount spent could come down, but I don't think anyone's going to argue with getting the best quality you can get in terms of the individual.
I don't agree with that.
I completely disagree with that you would get better candidates necessarily just because you're out of civil service. And I
I'm
think
not saying out
that
of service, the more you offer.
offer in terms of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not talking about that.
Yeah,
That's what I'm talking about. So.
oh, okay.
That wasn't what my comment was about. So maybe you were on a different comment.
Yeah, well, I was on
Different
the
topic,
overall
talking two different topics.
increasing the compensation.
I'm in favor of increasing compensation. I
Fine,
think
that was
the
my
police
point.
force is underpaid and they're undervalued and they're underappreciated.
That was my
So,
point.
so 100% with you, my friend. You should come back and sit next to me. But I don't agree that it's necessarily the right action to get out of civil service. I don't necessarily agree that's going to give you better candidates. And I do worry about hidden agendas with respect to that particular decision. That's what I worry about.
So did you want a motion as to
For-
Article 2 first?
Yes.
I move that the finance committee recommend adoption of Article 2 from collective bargaining unit police union.
Second it.
And I would just add, actually, to this comment, just as a town meeting member, I think I would also appreciate seeing them broken out.
Okay.
So we'll take a vote. John,
Yes.
Jim,
No.
Louise,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Rick Renetta,
Yes.
Paul Machete,
Yes.
Ernie Kaufman.
Yes.
I vote yes. The next article is Article 3, but it has not yet been ratified.
Correct.
So we'll hold off on that. Sounds like we may be meeting next week. We'll discuss that later. And then the next article is Article 4, exempt police from civil service.
I think I already gave you my
Yeah. We
speech on that.
we've discussed
So,
that.
but aside from a more diverse or different pool of candidates, what else? What are the other advantages?
So people are not taking the civil service test, and we don't have the ability to go out and recruit for our own applicant.
Does the finance committee need to take a position on this? Is it it's not it's just a matter of hiring protocols and candidate recruitment. The contract will have already been taken care of, so I will.
I think that, so Rick, well, I think the justification for much of the increases in the contract is
That's
the
what
removal.
I'd
of
like to know.
Exactly,
What if
right.
this got voted down?
Which, right,
What if 4 got voted down? What do
they
you?
still get all the increases.
So I think for that reason, the finance committee should take a position because it's connected to Article 2.
I also think that there are huge risks to getting out of civil service today. Both for the town, I mean, we've got to put into place a whole bunch of new procedures that don't exist right now. I also think that from the police officer perspective, they are now really unprotected. I think that we're going to see a lot more liability, a lot more lawsuits between employers and employees in police departments going forward. And civil service gives you that structure for determining all of those disputes.
I guess
That's just my own, yeah.
I would add, I appreciate that. We are not the first. We are far from the first. So there are many, many systems that are out there, including in Dedham and Westwood and Wellesley. So we're actually looking at working with them. And I would add that the members of the Needham Police Union voted to support the removal from civil service. They want this, and they appreciated it. And they did not object.
I saw online that there were some draft regulations posted as well.
So the draft regulations are for initial hire, and in the contract terms that are in the MOA is the promotion terms.
Could I help me with the financial implications of this?
So the justification for the larger,
was back to the-
than typical increases in Article 2 in the collective bargaining was contingent upon, not, I shouldn't say contingent, but that was the motivation from getting out of collect. I'm not explaining this well.
Yes,
Getting out of civil service was one of the reasons for the larger than typical increases.
But if you look at
So
the
to
article
Jim's point,
by itself,
Right.
what are the financial implications of standalone of Article 4?
Well, I guess the point is they don't really stand alone. They go hand in, I mean, they will at town meeting be voted independently, but
So they're really out of order in a way.
we don't control the order.
well, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, if Article 2 is,
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't pass,
you-
I'm not sure that the select board would move forward. They may ask for.
can someone cite for me very specific reasons why there's financial implications to this that otherwise we wouldn't have already? Someone cite me some very specific examples?
Well, I think,
So in the area of discipline, it is very different in civil service as it is in non-civil service communities. It is much more expensive in non-civil service than it is in civil service.
What do you mean by that?
Are what you're saying, Louise, civil service precludes people from suing for wrongful termination or suing for something other than
No,
the law projects
there is
for already?
Different structure, that is in place.
I don't know what that means.
I mean, the discipline is generally handled in police and fire by the arbitration provisions of the contract. They do have the right to use civil service, they don't. In Needham.
In Needham. Okay,
And for me, I guess my interpretation of the financial impact is if for whatever reason, the finance committee did not recommend, if the finance committee had a position about coming out of civil service, then it should revisit its position about the contract. I feel like they go hand in hand.
Mm,
No?
I think that that's how it was negotiated. But you could agree that the police officers should get this type of increase regardless of whether or not they come out of civil service.
And that's the way I looked at it. The
Yeah.
civil service part of that meant nothing to me, at least to
Right.
me.
Right,
In approving the collective bargaining component of it, it really played no role at all. Where I struggle with this is I just don't, I haven't studied this enough. I haven't seen anything on this. I don't understand the implications. So this is the first time I'm seeing it tonight, and I need to spend time with it. I'm not quite sure as a finance committee member, I'm versed in being able to pass off on this as a finance committee member. And so that's what I'm wrestling with, just saying, if the select board want to do it and the police want to do it, that's fine. And they've both had ongoing discussions about it, which we haven't been a part of, nor did we want to be or asked to be a part of. But I just can't jump in now and say, yeah, I'm in favor of this, or I'm not in favor of it. I just don't know enough about it. And so because I don't know enough about it, I'm going to vote against it.
so,
Just I don't
right,
have
so
enough background.
we have done our asterisks where we can't discern what the financial implications would be.
My understanding of maybe woefully out of date and limited, but my basic understanding of civil service was it's a method of protecting people from political hirings and firings within the governmental structure.
That's why it was created, yeah.
What in addition to that is involved with this? So I guess my question is, does this make it easier to hire and fire people by not having this in effect?
So the system was put in place in the 20s for political patronage. Public employees were given the right to bargain collectively in the 70s, so late 60s. So the advent of public safety unions, civil services role in discipline in many of the communities, at least that I'm familiar with, and in this community, has waned. But civil service retained the holding exams and issuing lists for which the town has to hire within a number on the top of the candidates on the list. And they do that also for promotion. The memo of agreement with the Needham Police Union outlines the method by which we would be hiring police sergeants and police lieutenants, basically mirrors the promotional requirements of civil service. There's an exam, there's an assessment center, there's a list created. The chief hires from the top, 3N+1, the math works. The major change in the civil service system is that at the very entry, we'll be able to go out and hire people. We can do a lot bigger recruitment and we can have a lot wider search. Then those people will be in the department, then they would be subject basically to the civil service-esque rules that are in place in the contract.
Right.
So if your question is it easier to hire? Yes. Is it easier to fire? No, that's about the same.
Rick, I'll give you the last word.
But it does not give the citizens of the town the better advantage that they used to have. It does not.
I don't know.
By changing the system. By going out of civil
The
service.
advantages over people who are
Correct.
not residents of the town.
That's right.
And
Am I wrong about that?
And the residency requirement is not a must, it's a preference. So what it is people aren't taking the civil service test
Rick, go ahead.
rather than anything else.
I, I would think it affords the town, and I guess I wasn't born here. And so I guess I don't have that emotional tie that only citizens have to come first. But it affords the town a greater opportunity to hire skilled talent on a whole bunch of levels. And so from a hiring perspective, spending 35 years in human resources, I would love to do this. Having my hands tied would not be the way to go. My fear is if this committee doesn't take a position in the affirmative, we may not understand it, but if we don't take a position in the affirmative and we come to town meeting floor and say like, we don't like it, what does that do to Articles 2 and 3 that will have a hard of a time anyway because they're more expensive than the 4 and 5%. And there's a lot of emotional feel against policemen to begin with. So I think we have to either not take a position because in essence, having a greater hiring stock doesn't necessarily impact us financially. And so I'm questioning, it's a great thing to do for the town to have that freedom, but what does it really say about finance? And do we or should we weigh in it anyway?
So I'm going to suggest that since we have to apparently meet next week for some other articles, including Article 3, the Police Superiors Union, which I think would also be affected by Article 4, the exemption for the civil service. Why don't we take a position next week on Article 4? And that'll also give us more time to gather more information if we need to.
Could I ask for just information?
Yeah.
How many of the members of the police force are Needham residents at higher?
So
Currently.
in order to take the test, they have to have lived in Needham for the year prior to the date of the application for the test. They can move out after. So within 20 miles, it's 20 miles, there's a requirement. So that is because Needham has a residency preference for civil service hire.
Well, that's good.
So I can tell you how many live here, but
Yeah.
I don't have that off the top
No,
of my
but
head.
But you just said that
that addresses the question.
Needham has a residency requirement or a residency preference.
That Needham's always operated its civil service system with resident. preference.
I can't imagine many entry-level people have the financial capability to live in Needham these days.
That's not necessarily true, Dick. It's just not.
Okay.
So
But
It's-
so,
I'm
but-
They don't
I'm gonna
own
suggest-
McMansions.
But
I'm
if
gonna
that's
suggest it's
the-
limited.
They could be living with their parents.
Community.
There's a lot of, but I think that
go ahead, Louise.
so the law doesn't require residency preference. The law gives towns the options for residency requirements. So if that is the issue, you don't have to get rid of all of civil service. You can simply get rid of the residency
If you get rid of the residency, you've got
preference.
the only hires that you will have will be, and this is not a pro or a con or an opinion. You will have only people on the list will be children of those killed in the line of duty, disabled vets and vets. That's the only people who will be on the list because they're always at the top and it's just residency preference. So that's not a pro or a con. I'm just telling you that that's what happens when you get out of residency.
So we'll continue this discussion
Josh.
next week. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
One more point, if the, not to belabor it, because we'll talk about it next week, but if the police have taken it upon themselves to choose to move in this direction, then may I suggest, with all due respect, who the hell are we? To
We're the
confirm,
finance.
that's different, to confine their efforts. No, we're not the point at which everyone brings their candle to light to. These folks have made a decision on their own. And so who are we to confound that? And I leave my position there.
Okay,
No, Mr. Chairman, that to me is, Rick, of all the things you said, this one makes no sense to me.
Let's
Don't
take
let
this offline.
departments-
We can take this offline, Mr. Healy, and we can talk about it offline.
Is that right, Mr. Chairman? So now I guess we don't get to speak? Is that how it works?
we always get to speak, but we still have more items on the agenda. I was trying to get through that. Okay, so we'll discuss this next week. Next article is 3, establish elected official salaries. This is the annual town meeting warrant.
Mr. Chair, I recommend that I move that the finance committee recommend adoption of Article 3.
Second.
establish elected officials.
Is there further comments? Just realized that. Thank you. Okay, then we'll take a vote. John,
Yes.
Jim,
Yeah.
Louise,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Next article is 45, which is related to 46, changing the general bylaws and the charter for NHA member towns.
I think those numbers have
Yeah, I
changed,
think it's
Josh.
now 40.
37 and 38.
37,
Yes.
38.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Want me to- I'll
Yeah,
run that?
thank you.
So in effective May 15th, 2021, state law changed to require that one member of the local housing authority in towns be a tenant member and appointed by the select board. Before that, as you probably know, the housing authority consisted of 4 members elected by the voters of Needham and 1 member appointed by the governor. The requirement is now that there be 3 members elected by the voters, 1 member appointed by the governor, and 1 member appointed by the select board who is a tenant of the Needham Housing Authority. Coincidentally, at the time of the passage, at the enactment of the law, Needham has a tenant member who was elected to the housing authority. And so the housing authority, with the endorsement of the select board, has submitted a waiver to the state that would allow that member to continue to serve out her term. And that when her term is up, the select board would be appointing a tenant member, and that's in 2026. Both the bylaws and the charter list the housing authority membership as 4 members elected by the voters. So Article 37 would amend the bylaw to reflect that 3, not 4 members should be elected by the voters, and the charter would see, Article 38 would amend the charter in a similar way.
A question
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the finance committee take no position on Article 37.
Second.
Okay, I have a question. Did you say that the state is mandating that the number of elected positions be reduced from 4 to 3, or is it that?
Yes.
So there's no option to keep 4 elected,
No.
it's just appointed another person. Okay,
No.
so this is to be in compliance with state law.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Further discussion? We'll vote on the recommendation to take no position. Rick Lunetta,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Harry,
Yeah.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And 38 would affect that change in the charter, correct?
Yes.
Is there a
I
motion?
make a motion that the finance committee not take a position with respect to Article 38.
Second.
Further discussion? Rick Lunetta,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The next article is 23, general fund cash capital. We received some responses to our questions regarding the breakout of some of the proposed costs, I believe, for the Elliott and Broad Meadow unit replacements, design for the unit replacements. Were there any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the finance committee recommend adoption of Article 23 to appropriate for general fund cash capital in the amount of $3,191,314.
Did I, go ahead.
On having finance committee reduce that number, it's at the table that's in the
There's a
warrant is correct.
discrepancy.
It's $116,314, so there will be a motion to correct what it reads in the warrant. There was an item for $75,000 that was removed.
The sum on the
Wow.
table.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Having been illuminated on that, I'll rephrase the motion to substitute $3,116,314.
Further discussion? We'll come to a vote. Rick, Renetta,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yep.
John,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The last, no, not last, we have the free cash item on our agenda. This was in response to, I mean, questions I've raised. We have some leftover free cash of the, I have the numbers in front of me.
There's $1,052,126. That's balance of free cash unallocated as of March 30th.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be that instead of keeping it unallocated, that we allocate it in two ways. One, by appropriating $1 million of that to line 5 in the operating budget for our OPEB. So increase that contribution by $1 million and amend the budget to reflect that. And then 2, to have the remaining amount of $52,126 be appropriated as an amendment to the appropriation we're making to the athletic facility improvement fund.
And the, just to be clear, there, as John alluded to, as of March 30th, there was $16,952,126 of certified free cash. And in aggregate, in the warrant, there's a planned appropriation of $15,900,000. So that's where the remainder comes from. If this money weren't appropriated, then it would go back into free cash for fiscal year 2023, but would not be available until certified, which could be January, could be not ultimately available for appropriation until May of next year. Go ahead, Dave.
Is the question, should we wait on this until we have a better feel for the resolution of the
Well,
We might have.
So I think-
roller issue? Because it could be another $5.5 million.
yeah, but so the challenge with that, I think, Dick, is going to be that there's within the warrant where to appropriate it. And my feeling is that if we decide to borrow it and not appropriate it, I would like to have those funds, put it into the debt service stabilization fund. And the next time we can do that, whether it's, I guess, maybe next year at this time, but we can't do it in this town meeting because there isn't a warrant article for it, as I understand it, Dave, correct?
Yeah. there's no
Oh, okay.
article.
Yeah. So we
That
would,
answers my question.
yeah, so the thinking would be, based on how that discussion goes, of that money would then, I would, at least that would I would propose, and I'm sure others will have other ideas, but we have to act within the corners of this warrant, and these are the two places to do it.
It's good now.
And I think it's part of what you're saying is that we wouldn't feel comfortable adding an additional $4.5 million to either of these sources. on
I would
top of
not,
what we're
no.
recommending. Is there further comments on John's suggestions?
Just confirming the amount 52,126.
Right.
That would be additional, so the
Yep.
total sum would be $85,659. And if we go ahead with this, I think it would make most sense for the people presenting these articles to also offer the amendments.
Right, so it would be within the, would be in the operating budget, and then within the
Article 31.
Article 31.
Is there further discussion?
You want to make a motion?
Yeah, so I'll make a motion because I think I like the ideas. I'll make separate motions so that in Article 10, we amend our recommendation and in effect amend line item 5, retiree insurance and insurance liability funds by first deleting the sum $7,844,474 and inserting in place thereof the sum $8,844,474. And second, to further amend Article 10 by deleting the sum $2,625,000 to be transferred from free cash and inserting in place thereof the sum $3,625,000.
I second that motion.
Some of the math of that, I agree. I'm
I
sure,
will ask for, to check, but yeah,
looking on your screen, it looks accurate.
okay, thank you. So the motion and a second for the discussion.
Good. Sorry, where is that coming from?
So that's line item 5. Increasing line item 5 by $1 million. And in the funding sources, increasing the free cash by $1 million.
It's coming from,
Nowhere.
Well, this is an additional appropriation, so it's not coming from any other line item. Which is allowed by the charter if the finance committee is offering it.
oh, okay.
Participating with us.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll come to a vote. Rick,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. There's a second motion. I'm happy to offer it. That Article 31 be amended by first deleting the sum $33,533 and inserting in place thereof the sum $85,659. And second, by deleting the word said sum, the words said sum, and inserting in place thereof the words $52,126 be transferred from free cash and VAT $33,533.
I second that motion.
Is there further discussion?
Josh, I'm sorry, I have an outdated warrant. Which article are you talking about?
This is Article
31.
31, yes.
But the,
Athletic facility.
okay, yes.
So it's
Sorry.
preserving the appropriation from the tax levy and
Yeah.
adding an additional appropriation. For
Oh, okay, I hear you. Okay.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Rick,
Yes.
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. I will send that to you, yes.
Thank you.
The next item, report on the 2021 annual town meeting. So at the annual town meeting of 2021, town meeting voted to refer an article back to the select board, finance committee and planning board for a report back in 2022. I reached out to the planning board and to the select board in December, and they informed me that they had tried to reach out to the proponents. And there haven't been much discussions. I again reached out a couple of weeks ago, and Lee Newman informed me that she had been in touch with the proponent, and there may be a desire to propose something new in the future, but there have been no public substantive discussions. So I would just ask that the finance committee authorize me to report that there have been no public discussions, certainly among the finance committee.
Just to clarify, this is a strip along Hunting Road.
Exactly, yeah.
There was a developer stooping around the woodwork.
That was a concern. Yeah, go ahead.
I did ask Lee to draft it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so.
So authorized.
Do we have to take a vote on that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'll
Should I take a vote on that?
also say something to that effect. Then finance committee updates. It sounds like we do need a meeting for next week to discuss articles 21 of the annual town meeting and articles 3 and 4 of the special town meeting. Are people available to meet Wednesday evening at our usual time?
I am going to be on a plane, Josh, unfortunately.
We can meet other nights, other than Tuesday, I think, 'cause I'll be with the select board.
And I'm going to be out of town, unfortunately, till late Wednesday night. So I won't be available.
Almost strikes me that could be a Zoom meeting,
It could be.
because
Yeah,
the issues are gonna be pretty cut and dried by that point, I
Yeah.
think.
I agree with that.
I could probably do a Zoom on Tuesday. I just can't do it on Wednesday. it's
What about, so I'm going to be meeting with the select board regarding Emery Grover on Tuesday, so I think we need to wait until
Okay,
after that.
Thursday then.
Does that work with people to meet on Thursday?
It doesn't for me, but
Thursday does not work.
All right.
Let's stick with Wednesday.
I
Stick with Wednesday.
Thursday, meet down here after, or meet anywhere after. Yeah.
It's a lot. Let's meet Wednesday. Okay, I'm sorry, Barry.
That's okay. No, I understand.
Yeah, so let's meet Wednesday at the same time, 7 PM. It'll be Zoom. Let's
Select
just
board
do-
meeting will be televised, right? So we could listen in and.
Yeah.
Maybe would facilitate the discussion on Wednesday.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So Josh, did you say that, is that 100% Zoom meeting or a meeting?
I'm happy for it to be 100% Zoom.
And I just was wondering, I thought that was thrown out. Doesn't matter to me.
I can do either.
We'll give people an option. We can do hybrid. Yeah. So let's do a hybrid meeting on Wednesday at 7 PM. Any other comments or updates?
I have one quick update. I
Yes.
just want to report to the committee that I have informed Michael Fee and Josh that this is my last year in the finance committee. I'll be finishing out the rest of the term. I just didn't want you guys to hear it through the grapevine. In case you've already heard it, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure you heard.
I
Right,
informed Josh, but not Michael Fee.
Okay.
This is my last year too.
yeah.
oh boy.
I also, yeah, I also informed, I also informed Josh and I also informed Michael Fee in a letter. This is my last year as well.
Why don't we just close up shop?
Well, so we're gonna miss all three of you. If you're in-
Oh, you'll carry on fine.
There'll be more to be discussed as
Yeah,
far as,
It might make some sense to stagger this. Because it's gonna be hard to get 3 replacements.
I'll go August. I'll leave in August.
No, I haven't communicated with Michael Fee, so I could be persuaded to last another year.
Dick, you should last
I
another
don't think
year.
Kathy wants you home on Wednesday nights. Dick.
Dick, I will pay for your transportation each way.
Oh, in particular. Okay, I withdraw my resignation. So, I mean,
Take a
it's
motion.
tough to
on
get
it.
3
Make a
people.
Yeah, that's true, but yeah, we have welcomed your presence for as long as you've been here.
I didn't realize I could open a waterfall there.
Excellent.
We'll have proper times to thank and
We will.
congratulate
We
and
will.
celebrate, right?
Yes, absolutely. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second. We'll take a vote. Rick Lunetta,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
John,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes. Good night, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you all.